Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories this hour. Palestinian officials say Israeli forces destroy at least 30 residential buildings in Gaza City, forcing thousands to flee as U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrives for talks. Israel vows to seize the city where 1 million people shelter as it intensifies strike on what it calls Hamas's last bastion. An emergency summit of Arab and Islamic leaders meets on Monday in Doha after Israel strikes on Hamas in Qatar, which killed 5 members but spared its leadership. The attack prompts Gulf states to close ranks behind Qatar, deepening strains in ties between the UAE and Israel. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer vows he will not tolerate intimidation based on race or background after a far-right rally drew 150,000 people. He slams attacks on police and says Britain remains a nation built on tolerance, diversity and respect. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng meet in Madrid to tackle tariffs, trade disputes and a looming U.S. deadlock for TikTok's Chinese owner to divest. Officials expect only another extension with little progress on Russia, oil pressures or the future of the popular app. A Ukrainian military source said Kiev's intelligence agency carried out attacks on Russia's rail system, derailing a train and killing 3 officers. The GUR claims it targeted crucial supply routes, feeding Russian forces in the Kharkiv and Sumy directions. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas calls the violation of Romanian airspace by a Russian drone unacceptable, warning it is a reckless escalation that threatens regional security. She vows solidarity with Romania and says the EU is in close contact with Bucharest. Former boxing world champion Ricky Hatton is found dead at his home in Hyde, Greater Manchester, police have confirmed, at the age of 46. The British boxing icon, who retired in 2012 after winning titles at light welterweight and welterweight, had been planning a comeback in Dubai later this year. In his first interview as pontiff, Pope Leo slams executive pay deals like Tesla's $1 trillion package for Elon Musk, saying they far outstrip workers' salaries. The Chicago-born Pope also speaks about his missionary years in Peru, the United Nations, and his prayers for peace in Ukraine. We start this hour in Europe, where US and Chinese officials have begun trade talks in Madrid, focusing on strained economic ties, a looming divestiture deadline for Chinese short video platform TikTok, and Washington's pressure on allies to impose tariffs over Beijing's purchases of Russian oil. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Trade Representative Jamieson Greer arrived at the Palacio de Santa Cruz, which houses Spain's foreign ministry, shortly before Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng and lead trade negotiator Li Chenggang. This marks the 4th round of high-level discussions in 4 months, as both sides struggle to prevent their fractured relationship from collapsing under President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs. The last round, held in Stockholm in July, resulted in a 90-day trade truce that eased triple-digit retaliatory duties and restarted flows of rare earth minerals from China to the United States. Trump has now approved an extension of current US tariffs on Chinese imports, maintaining an average rate of 55% through to November the 10th. We're now joined by Raymond Vickery, who's a former US Assistant Secretary of Commerce, and he joins us live from Washington, D.C. Raymond, it's always a pleasure to have you on the program. This is the 4th round of talks in 4 months. Each time an extension is granted. Does this suggest that momentum is shifting towards stabilising ties or simply an effort to stop things from falling apart?
Well, thanks very much for having me, Thomas. It's always a pleasure. I'm afraid that this is an indication of just kicking the can down the road. In order to wage peace, just like you wage war, you've got to have a strategy and you've got to have partners and allies in order to be effective. Unfortunately, Donald Trump, our president, does not have either strategy or partners. He views these as transactions that are separate and apart from the relationships which require nations to be bound together in a common purpose, particularly democratic nations. So what is going on here is simply preliminary sparring. And it is, of course, to be favored over actual violence or hostilities, but it does not get us to a long-term kind of solution. I have every confidence that what Donald Trump has in mind is that he and Xi are going to get together and they're going to make a deal in which President Trump will be able to say that he won and that it'll be resolved that way. But that's not going to happen. So, yes, it's good that the sides are talking. But if you haven't made any progress in 4 rounds, it's difficult to see, particularly with threats of 100% retaliation from not only the U.S. but from Europe as to how you come together. We have to get back to a multilateral approach in which the democracies have a strategy and have cooperation in order to achieve an end. But at this point, that's sadly lacking.
Raymond, are these tariffs still an effective tool to pressure Beijing from Washington, or do they risk pushing the US deeper into an economic standoff with China?
Well, tariffs are not a end all. In fact, it's unclear whether President Trump even has the power under the U.S. laws and Constitution to do it. He's certainly pushing the envelope at the very least. Tariffs have not proven to be an effective instrument of international policy really at any time. You can make an argument that coordinated sanctions of various kinds have helped, such as in the South African case. But these ideas that you're just going to wall off others by threatening tariffs and that somehow the United States is a fortress America economically and really doesn't need the rest of the world is a non-starter. This is not an approach which is going to yield results in the long run, and of course is hurting the United States in terms of one of the key issues that President Trump ran on, which was that he's going to bring down inflation. That just is not going to happen with this one-size-fits-all tariff policy.
Yes, and Raymond, do stay with us. We have some breaking news coming in. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has launched a sharp criticism of India's trade policies, accusing New Delhi of blocking American exports while flooding the U.S. market with its own goods. In an interview, Lutnick highlighted agriculture as a major flashpoint, saying India, with a population of 1.4 billion, refuses to buy even a small quantity of U.S. corn. He warned that India must lower tariffs or face a tough time doing business with America. Raymond, I just want to get your immediate response on that. Some tough words there for the Indian audience from U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, saying that it is not fair in the American point of view. Threats of further tariffs seem to be there from the Trump administration. Can I get your response, Raymond? Can you? Okay, I believe we've had a connection issue there. Apologies. hopefully while Raymond joins us once again. I just want to read out Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick's comments once again. He has said that India must lower the tariffs to the United States or face a tough time doing business with America. Raymond once again joins us to discuss this. Raymond, as I said previously, some harsh words there, some very forward words there from US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick concerning the fact that he still warns that India's tariffs are too high and possibly hinting at further economic repercussions towards India, labelling a result of a tough time if India doesn't lax its tariffs on America. What are your thoughts on Howard Lutnick's words there, Raymond?
My thought is that this is no way to treat a friend. That the U.S. and India over the last 30 years have made great progress in bridging the gaps between them. Reconciliation from the status of being estranged democracies has happened at an ever increasing pace. And to then treat India as if it's responsible for the world's woes and not have an appreciation for the special role, particularly that agriculture and dairy play in the Indian economy with literally millions and millions of farmers dependent upon being able to have their markets, shows that there is no understanding of the Indian situation. We have to get back to a program in which there is cooperation rather than confrontation between the U.S. and India. There has been broad bipartisan support for that in the United States, but Lutnick's remarks, the remarks that he made previously concerning Brahmins, all of those things are counterproductive to a U.S.-India relationship, which should be one of the most important in the entire world in bringing peace and prosperity.
Yes, Raymond, thank you very much. You are staying with us to discuss updates from Europe, where Romania has strongly condemned the entry of a Russian drone into its airspace during strikes on neighbouring Ukraine. Bucharest warned that Moscow's actions present a new challenge to Black Sea security. The incident comes just days after Poland also reported Russian drones violating its airspace, calling them dangerous provocations. Polish fighter jets were scrambled over the weekend amid fresh attacks near the border. The European Union's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, has slammed the violation as an unacceptable escalation, calling it a breach of sovereignty and vowing full solidarity with Romania. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has also responded and warned that such incursions mark an expansion of the war, urging sanctions, tariffs and stronger collective defence measures. We are once again joined by Raymond Vickery to discuss this pressing and breaking issue currently going on in Europe. Raymond, I just want to ask you, of course, Poland reported similar violations a day earlier, 19 drones back then, in contrast to this last one, however, still a significant event. Do you think we're seeing a pattern here of Moscow testing NATO's resolve along its eastern borders?
I think there's no question that that's what's going on. President Putin has really had from the very first the idea that his greatness and Russian greatness is dependent upon control, really, of Eastern European nations. Russia, through the USSR, had inherited the old Tsarist empire, and he wants to reassemble it. There is a saying that you probe your enemy with a bayonet, If you find steel, you back off. But if you do not find resistance, then you keep moving forward. And I'm afraid that that's what's happening, first in regard to Poland. You know, the idea that you had 19 drones go astray and it was just some sort of mistake is very preposterous on its face. And now you have further probing in regard to Romania. So what's going on here is a President Putin grand design to reconstruct a Russian empire. When he talks about root causes, what he means is that we don't have control over Ukraine. We don't have control over Eastern Poland. We don't have control over the Baltic states. We don't have control over Romania. But if we had control over them, in other words, reassemble the old Russian Empire, then the root causes would be no longer there. But of course, that is not going to lead to peace and prosperity. We have seen that appeasement is not the way forward, and it is time for there to be a strategy and partners in order to try to rein in these Putin and Russian ambitions.
Yes, Raymond Vickery, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. We now move on but stay in Europe. French Rafale fighter jets are now patrolling Polish skies as part of NATO's Eastern Sentry operation. The move comes after Russian drones violated Poland's airspace earlier this week. France has deployed 3 Rafale jets along with personnel handling equipment and ammunition to help secure the region. The aircraft became fully operational on Friday, according to the French armed forces. On Wednesday, Poland, with support from NATO allies, shot down Russian drones that crossed into its territory, a first for any alliance member since the start of the war in Ukraine. Eastern Sentry was launched as a direct response to these incursions, aiming to reinforce NATO's presence and strengthen defences along Europe's eastern flank. Okay, we now got some breaking news from the Middle East, where Qatar's Prime Minister has vowed that Israeli actions in Gaza will not deter Doha from pursuing mediation efforts. Speaking today, he said Qatar, along with Egypt and the United States, remains committed to brokering a ceasefire and bringing an end to the war. The Prime Minister warned that Israel's escalation would only undermine de-escalation efforts and hinder negotiations. He stressed that Doha will continue engaging all parties despite growing obstacles on the ground. The leader has further urged the world to stop using double standards and punish Israel. We are now joined by Mohammed Osman. He's an international relations specialist and he joins us live from Cairo in Egypt. Thank you very much for joining us, Mohammed, here on the programme. Mohammed, of course, the Qatari capital is still reeling from that Israeli attack where it attempted to assassinate Hamas's leading negotiating team. How important is it for this war that that the Qatari Prime Minister and the Qatari government has made this decision despite this attack that happened on a sovereign nation just a few days ago?
Thank you for having me, Thomas. Greetings to you and to your dear audience. Unfortunately, we are witnessing a rather unprecedented situation, maybe in contemporary international relations, where a mediator is targeted by one of the belligerents it's mediating between. You know, we have reached a situation in the Middle East where it now has become not only inconceivable, it has become farcical and laughable, also, and at the same time tragic. Simultaneously, because what we are seeing is that all of the already very slim chances of reaching a peaceful resolution in Gaza and in the occupied Palestinian territories are even now growing more and more distant. Unfortunately, it seems that the Israel's endgame by undertaking such a brazen strike, and of course a brazen violation of Qatari sovereignty, by such a brazen step, they did not only intend to assassinate members of Hamas or some of Hamas's leadership, so they attempted to do. This is a marginal goal. I think that the actual goal was to completely diminish the chances of the success of any initiatives for de-escalation and reaching a ceasefire and a hostage exchange agreement. Israel doesn't want that. Israel wants to continue its ground onslaught on Gaza City. They want to reoccupy the entirety of the Gaza Strip with the ultimate aim of displacing the Palestinians out of Gaza. And this is no secret. This is the public stance of the Israeli government and members of the Israeli government and Prime Minister Netanyahu himself, who dresses this as or disguises these aims as facilitating the voluntary departure of the Palestinians. And of course, this is completely endorsed by the United States. So now we stand before a situation that is growing ever more tense, that tensions are still escalating in the region, that the region now is more prone to violence than any time before. Israel now has not limited itself to targeting its adversaries. It targeted its adversaries, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, Hamas in the occupied territories. They targeted Iran, pro-Iranian militias in Iraq. They targeted the Syrian regime, the Assad regime before, because it was aligned with Iran. Now they expand into Syrian territories and they target groups that they consider radical Islamist groups. However, now when they go ahead and target Qatar, a country that they have official economic and political relations with, and that was running a mediation between them, along with Egypt, between them and the Palestinian factions, this is an unprecedented escalation that actually threatens that the already established peace agreements between Israel and a variety of countries in the region, including Egypt. By the way, Egypt has signed a peace agreement with Israel ending the state of war back in 1979. However, now the relationship between both countries has deteriorated to their lowest levels because of Israel's continuous threat of attempting to displace the Palestinians into Egyptian territory, something that the Egyptian leadership has described as a red line. And the reports in the Egyptian media and even in the international media have indicated that Egypt is willing to go as far as to revisit the idea of peace with Israel if Israel goes forward with its plans to forcefully displace the Palestinians into its territories. We are seeing now a state in the region, Israel, a rogue state that is acting with absolute impunity. And as long as it is its behavior is uncontrolled, the region will witness more and more chaos and turmoil.
Okay, Mohammed, do stay with us. We have further updates coming out of that developing situation where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the visit by top U.S. diplomat Marco Rubio underscores the, quote, strength of ties between the allies, describing the U.S. Israel alliance as, quote, as durable as the stones in the Western Wall. Let's listen in to his statements.
This is by way of reading an extraordinary friend, Secretary of State of the United States, Marco Rubio, and his wife, Jack. I think his visit here is a testament to your ability, the strength of the Israeli-American alliance. It's as strong and as durable as the stones of the Western Wall that we just touched under President Trump and Secretary Rubio and their entire team. This alliance never.
Netanyahu made the remarks after offering prayers at the Western Wall alongside Rubio and Washington's envoy to Israel, Mike Huckabee. The visit comes days after an Israeli strike targeted Hamas leaders in Qatar, which drew broad criticism. We are once again joined by Mohammed Osman. Mohammed, this obviously is occurring as Israel continues its offensive inside Gaza and Gaza City, where at least 30 residential buildings were targeted today in the operations. This visit just comes also, of course, after Israel struck the Hamas leaders in Qatar. Is Rubio's presence a signal of unconditional US backing here, despite all of the international criticism that comes Israel's way for both the Gaza war and, of course, because of these strikes on Qatar?
It sends very dangerous signals, Thomas, that could be very detrimental to the stability of the region and also to the United States' strategic relationship with many countries in this region, namely, of course, and specifically the Gulf states, who have been now targeted for the first time ever since the beginning of the Arab-Israeli conflict by Israel. And ironically, these countries were very eager to normalize relations with Israel over the past few years. Some of them even signed the Abraham Accords, like the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and others. So now these countries are revisiting the idea of normalization with Israel because Israel is now proving to be a very unreliable partner and a dangerous neighbor, one way or the other. So now Marco Rubio comes in the midst of these circumstances, and he expresses publicly that the United States is not that eager to maintain its partnerships with many of the Arab states, or at least they take these partnerships for granted. If you've heard what Marco Rubio said yesterday before embarking on his visit to Israel, when asked about the strikes on Doha, he said they were unfortunate and that what happened has happened. And I'm repeating what he said word for word. What happened has happened. We should move past it, and this will never affect our relationship with Israel. So it seems that the message that is being conveyed today is that no matter what Israel does, they will always remain a valuable ally of the United States, and they will always enjoy the unlimited support and political cover provided by the United States, unfortunately, and of course the economic and military backing as well, which basically has made Israel so resilient and able to continue fighting a multitude of wars on several fronts for about 2 years now. However, this could be very detrimental to U.S. influence in the region because other countries in the regions have other options they can look towards. And this impunity that Israel acts with and Israel's increasingly aggressive policies, and now the biblical ideas of greater Israel and the attempts to realize greater Israel on the ground by occupying more Palestinian territories, attempting to displace them, occupying territories in Lebanon and in Syria, and attempting to annex them or indicating that they might annex them at some point. This could be very detrimental to peace in the region and will not buy Israel security. It will buy it more war, more violence, and more bloodshed, unfortunately. And the United States is not acting responsibly in this regards. If anything, they are emboldening Israel and sending very wrong messages and signals to their other partners in the region.
Yes, Mohammed, do stay with us. We move away from the Israel-Gaza conflict next, but we move over to Syria, where it will hold its first parliamentary elections in mid-September since former President Bashar al-Assad's government fell in December of last year. This election process will be fully indirect. Local electoral bodies composed of community figures will be responsible for nominating and selecting parliamentarians. The new assembly will consist of 210 seats. 1/3 of the members will be directly appointed by Syrian interim leader Ahmed al-Shara, while the remaining 2/3 will be chosen by local electoral colleges. The main responsibilities of the People's Assembly will include overseeing legislative affairs during the transitional period and fostering economic recovery in Syria, where the majority of the population lives below the poverty line. Listen in as a political expert elaborates on the need for a parliament in Syria.
هناك قرارات يتم اتخاذها اليوم هي بالفعل بحاجة إلى عودة إلى مجلس النواب، مثل الحوار مع الكيان الإسرائيلي على سبيل المثال، مثل يعني قرارات أخرى متعلقة بتغيير سياسة الدولة بالكامل، بتغيير الشكل الثقافي للدولة، حتى بمسألة الجيش وإدماج بعض العناصر.
The term of the People's Assembly will last up to 3 years until a permanent constitution is adopted. Citizens remain hopeful that the new parliament will unite the country and boost civil peace. Let's take a listen.
أشوف إنه من مهام مجلس الشعب بعد تشكيله بعد انتخابه الخطوة الأساسية والأهداف من برنامج عمله إنه يتوجه للتماسك المجتمعي والسلم الأهلي ووحدة المجتمع السوري ونقل الآراء ومتطلعات الشعب السوري بمصير البلاد.
We are once again joined by Mohammed Osman to discuss this developing situation in Syria. Mohammed, the leadership of Ahmed al-Shara is constantly put under scrutiny around the world. How important is this parliament in legitimising this transitional leadership of al-Shara?
Well, overtly, at least in very theoretical terms, it is rather a positive development that Syria will have a parliament now, and it means that the process of rebuilding the Syrian state and restoring constitutional order one way or the other is in motion. This is how it looks like, Thomas. However, reality says otherwise. Reality says that Syria is in a state of a political impasse. Syria is in a state where one political faction or factions from a certain background, and that is the Islamist background, are completely dominating the political and the public space inside Syria since the ouster of Bashar al-Assad. And this new Islamist government has been adopting a very authoritarian form of governance. President al-Shara came, or Ahmed al-Shara, who used to be, by the way, to be called Abu Muhammad al-Julani, the commander of Al-Qaeda's affiliate in Syria. So this man who came to power with the force of arms, not by elections, not by choice, not even by the consensus of other Syrian political forces, came and established himself as the interim president of Syria. And afterwards, he held a sham national dialogue conference that did not include many important proponents of Syrian society, especially actual representatives of religious and ethnic minorities, and they put forward a roadmap for a transitional period that paves the way for a new system of governance that lacks any democratic guarantees from the way things stands. And the upcoming parliamentary election is concrete evidence of that. So a parliament will be elected, but do you know what, Thomas? It will not be elected through universal suffrage. The people will not elect this parliament. Local committees from the governorates or the provinces of Syria will choose the members of the parliament. About 70% will be chosen by those committees, and 30% will be directly appointed by President al-Shara. And of course, as you might very well know, those committees in these Syrian provinces have been formed by the new Syrian administration or the Syrian regime. So this will be another new rubber stamp parliament, just like the parliaments of Bashar al-Assad in the previous regime. So this is farcical, to be honest, and unfortunately Syria is walking steadily on a path towards civil war and maybe even collapse.
Mohammed Osman, thank you very much for that brilliant analysis, and thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. We now move on and over to South Asia, where Nepal's interim Prime Minister Sushila Karki says she was compelled to take charge and she's not here to taste power. She added that she will only serve 6 months, declaring September the 8th victims martyrs, with compensation, investigation and prosecution promised. The 73-year-old former Chief Justice chaired her first government meeting after being appointed to lead the nation. Her appointment follows unrest triggered by anger over corruption and inequality, which culminated in large-scale youth demonstrations, forcing the resignation of former Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli. Let's have a look at what she had to say.
परिस्थितिमा म आए कुनै रहरले म आएको होइन सडकबाट जताततैबाट मलाई फलानालाई सुशीला कार्कीलाई जिम्मा देऊ भनेर आवाज उठ्यो मैले पनि विवश हुनु पर्यो र जहाँसम्म मेरो जुन टिम छ टिमले जुन काम गरिरहेछ हामीले चाहिँ के छ भने हामी कुनै यो सत्ताको यो पदको रसस्वादन गर्न आएको होइन मेरो उमेर पनि होइन त्यो हामीले के चाहेको भने ठीक छ हाम्रोलाई खोजियो आवाज गरियो त हामीले यो बेलामा किन सेवा नगर्ने भनेर सक्दो हामीले के गर्यौं भने 6 महिना मात्रै अवधि त्योभन्दा बढी नबस्ने कुनै हालतमा पनि हामीले पूरा यो आफ्ना काम कारबाही गरेर हामी चाहिँ मुक्त हुने र नयाँ आउने संसद नयाँ आउने मन्त्रीहरूलाई जिम्मेवारी र दायित्व सुम्पिने.
Meanwhile, in Nepal's town of Parping, south of Kathmandu, Locals are sharing their views on the country's new interim Prime Minister. Let's have a look at what people have to say.
अब ये नई सरकार आई हुई है, अब ये इसने क्या करना चाहिए, सबसे पहले जितना भावनाशेष है, जो टूटा-फूटा है वो तो बनना चाहिए और नेपाली लोगों को और कुछ नहीं चाहिए, घास, बाँस, कपास, स्वास्थ्य, शिक्षा, इतना हो, रोजगारी दो।
उसको नई सरकार को ये 6 महीने के अंदर 6 महीने के बीच में चुनाव करना चाहिए। अंतरिम सरकार के प्रधानमंत्री के नाते से वो सुशीला कार्की ने, यही है जनता का इच्छा, यही है। और JNG का मांग भी उससे पूरा करना चाहिए। JNG का वो पिछले पार्टी जो है ना, कांग्रेस, MLA और माओवादी, उसने जनता को अच्छा नहीं किया। वो अपने ही आदमियों को खुश रखा और किसी को कुछ नहीं किया, इसलिए वो चला गया।
अब महिलामा चाहिँ हाम्रो चाहिँ कार्की संसद आया था, उसको चाहिँ अरे चाहिँ बहुत अच्छा लगा है, सब खुश रहना चाहिए। सब आप सब रटल हो गए क्या, सब आप बनाने के कोई तोड़फोड़ हो गया, तोड़फोड़ के सबसे अच्छा हो से बनाना पड़ेगा। कितना घर तोड़फोड़, कितना गाड़ी जलाया, कितना मानिस मरा, उसको चाहिँ अब सबसे शांति होना चाहिए सब।
Well, that is all that we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.